Ireland is announcing criminal charges against 3 Iranian hackers who allegedly targeted the Trump campaign. Let's listen.
Metropolitan areas across the country. Before we do, however, there are 2 matters I want to address. The first is a major law enforcement action the Justice Department has taken to counter some of the many threats Iran poses to our country. And the second is that we will soon mark 1 year since Hamas's October 7th terrorist attack on Israel. First, with regard to Iran, there are few actors in this world that pose as grave a threat to the national security of the United States as does Iran, a state sponsor of terrorism. Iran's malign activities are wide-ranging. The U.S. government is intensely tracking Iran's lethal plotting against current and former U.S. government officials, including former President Trump. We are working to investigate and disrupt Iran's funding and support of Hamas, Hezbollah, and other terrorist groups. And we are working relentlessly to uncover and counter Iran's efforts to stoke discord, to undermine confidence in our democratic institutions, and to influence our elections. As the intelligence community has reported, we are seeing increasingly aggressive Iranian cyber activity during this election cycle. In August, the intelligence community reported an ongoing effort by Iran to compromise former President Trump's campaign and to influence the U.S. election process. Last week, the intelligence community reported that in late June and early July, Iranian malicious cyber actors sent unsolicited emails to individuals who were then associated with President Biden's campaign. The emails contained an excerpt taken from stolen, non-public information from former President Trump's campaign as text in the emails. The intelligence community reported that there is currently no information indicating the recipients of the emails replied. The intelligence community further reported that Iranian malicious cyber actors have continued their efforts since June to send stolen, non-public material associated with former President Trump's campaign to U.S. media organizations. Moments ago, the Justice Department unsealed an indictment charging 3 hackers working for the Iranian government with material support for terrorism, computer fraud, wire fraud, and identity theft for their roles in these cyber attacks. The 3 hackers are Iranian nationals residing in Iran. As outlined in our indictment, the defendants, Masoud Jalili, Saeed Ali Agamiri, and Yasir Balaghi, conspired with others to deploy a years-long, wide-ranging hacking operation on behalf of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. The operation targeted the email accounts of current and former American public officials, journalists, and most recently, individuals associated with U.S. political campaigns. The defendants' own words make clear that they were attempting to undermine former President Trump's campaign in advance of the 2024 U.S. presidential election. We know that Iran is continuing its brazen efforts to stoke discord, erode confidence in the U.S. electoral process, and advance its malign activities to the IRGC, a designated foreign terrorist organization. The Justice Department is committed to countering the threat that Iran poses to our democracy, to our national security, and to our allies in the international community. As we approach the upcoming election, I want to reiterate that the Justice Department will not tolerate attempts by Iran or by any foreign power to interfere in our elections and undermine our democracy. Together with our partners across the federal government, we will use every tool we have to counter and disrupt the efforts of Iran, as well as Russia and China, to exploit our democratic system of government. The message of the U.S. government is clear. The American people, not a foreign power, decide the outcome of our country's elections. Not Iran and its malicious cyber activities, as laid bare in today's indictment. Not Russia and its efforts to spread disinformation and propaganda to secure its preferred outcome in the U.S. presidential election, as laid bare in the indictment and seizures announced earlier this month. and not China, which continues in its efforts to exert targeted influence at the federal, state, and local levels in furtherance of the PRC's agenda, as described in multiple previous indictments and the intelligence community's recent election security updates. These authoritarian regimes, which violate the human rights of their own citizens, do not get a say in our country's democratic process. The American people, and the American people alone, will decide the outcome of our country's elections. Now to the second matter. In just over a week, we will mark 1 year since Hamas's October 7th terrorist attack on Israel. On October 7th, 2023, Hamas terrorists murdered nearly 1,200 people, including more than 40 Americans, and kidnapped hundreds of civilians. And they perpetrated the deadliest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. We are committed to pursuing the terrorists responsible for murdering Americans and those who illegally provide them with material support for the rest of their lives. Earlier this month, the Justice Department unsealed charges against Yahya Sinwar and other senior leaders of Hamas for the October 7th attacks and for financing and directing a decades-long campaign to murder American citizens and endanger the security of the United States. Those charges are just one part of our effort to target every aspect of Hamas's operations. There will be more to come. In the wake of Hamas's October 7th attacks, we also saw a disturbing increase in the volume and frequency of threats here at home against Jewish, Muslim, Arab, and Palestinian communities. That is why last October I directed all of our U.S. attorneys' offices and all of our FBI field offices to meet with local law enforcement and community leaders to strengthen our response to threats of hate-fueled violence. And that is what we have continued to do in the year since. But we recognize that the ramifications of October 7th are still being felt in communities across the country. For the Jewish community, this has been a time of a renewed, deeply familiar sense of isolation and fear. And as we approach 1 year since the October 7th attacks, we do so at a time when Jews across the country will soon be observing the high holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. For Jews, this is a period of solemn reflection and prayer. It is a time to gather together to worship and to be in community with each other. It should not be a time of fear. The Justice Department has and will continue to aggressively investigate and prosecute acts and threats of violence fueled by anti-Semitism and by hatred of any kind. In recent months, the department has brought charges, obtained plea agreements, and obtained sentences for more than 35 defendants for criminal acts motivated by anti-Semitic hate. This is in addition to the many charges brought by our state and local partners. That work will continue. No person and no community in this country should have to live in fear of hate-fueled violence. No faith community should have to fear that they will be attacked in their place of worship. The Justice Department has no higher priority than protecting the safety and civil rights of everyone in our country. Working to uphold that promise is our sacred responsibility. It is one we will never abandon.